On behalf of the JRP, I would like to thank all of you all for joining us this evening for our 2025 Talk Justice Tuesday event. If you are new to our space and aren't familiar with the Justice Reform Partnership, we are a collective of 90 or more individuals and organizations working for criminal legal reform here in the state of Georgia. Our coalition, we bring together grassroots organizations, grass tops organizations, directly impacted people, community organizers, advocates, legal experts, all working towards meaningful justice reform here in Georgia and change. Our Talk Justice Tuesday events we host during the legislative session to um, to focus on legislation and policy changes that are happening at the Georgia State Capitol or under the Gold Dome, as he say, to focus on the communities that are impacted by criminal legal reform. One of the things that I like to think about with our Talk Justice Tuesday events is that it gives everyday people like myself or like you who are joining the call to help us break down these complex policy issues that are happening through legislation like you're here tonight. It also helps us amplify the voices of directly impacted people, families, formerly incarcerated folks. And it also helps us to determine strategies for change, become change makers. Tonight, our conversation, we're going to focus on our take on legislative advocacy 101, or how everyday people can impact Georgia laws and how your voice can be heard. You're going to hear from a lot of great panelists, a lot of great experts. But before we get started, a couple of things I want to help you all to understand. We got a lot of panelists, we got a lot of attendees tonight. If you have questions, please use the Q&A function in your devices. We do have a chat function, but we prefer you use the Q&A if you have questions. After the presentations, you will have an opportunity to ask questions with our panelists. All the information you get tonight, we'll share out with you via email, the recordings, slides, resources. We'll update our website as well. Another thing I would like to, I don't know, Rosalind, if you can share the screen as far as our updated Talk Justice Tuesday events. We do have 3 upcoming Talk Justice Tuesday events coming up that are open for registration. If you could register for those, February 11th. That's our Youth Justice, Talk Justice Tuesday. It is titled Caught in Between Youth in the Criminalization of Immigration. Please register for that event. After February the 11th, we have our March 11th crossover day legislation. If you're unfamiliar with crossover, stay tuned. That terminology you'll know by the end of tonight. Those will be legislation that will be pending after crossover day. And April the 8th. Although our session ends April 3rd, please join us for our April 8th session. This work can be hard, it can be taxing. We need to decompress, find ways to decompress and take care of ourselves. If this work was easy, everybody would be doing it, I always say. By all of you showing up here tonight on a Tuesday evening, we appreciate your time. So come back and visit us on April 8th for our session of surviving burnout and surviving triumph on April 8th. All of those sessions start at 6 o'clock. So please refer to our website. We'll put that in the chat, how to register for those events as well. So those are some housekeeping for tonight. Also, staying engaged with us with the JRP. If you hear anything that you would like to get engaged as far as membership, look at our website. We have information of how you become a member as far as with our partnership as well. So housekeeping, that's Talk Justice Tuesday. That's information about our partnership. But tonight we hear about how everyday people can impact Georgia laws. At this time, I would like to turn our panel over to Bree Simpson. Bree Simpson is the co founder and the executive director of Bard Business. Bree will share some background information about who she is, her organization, and she will guide our conversation into our topic tonight. Bree?
Awesome. Welcome, everyone. Thank you all for joining us. Such a good turnout, like Nikki said, on a Tuesday shows a lot of commitment. I think what's really important for us to talk about is that the average person has no clue what goes on under the gold dome. They have no clue why they should even vote, why this process impacts them. So I think what we need to do communally is to be able to make these things relatable to everyday people so folks understand just what we're talking about, why it's important, why they should show up. So I one of my favorite quotes of all time is that if you don't have a seat at the table, you're on the menu most likely. So a lot of us who are just regular everyday folks, these laws are being made, um, legislators are being selected. We have no clue on what goes on behind their lives, and they're deciding our lives, which means that we are on the menu. We're up for grabs. Our lives are up for grabs. I myself, I'm a justice impacted woman. I served 10 years. And in serving that 10 years, I had no clue what a mandatory minimum sentence was. And I had no clue that the mandatory minimum sentence was, that decision was brought to through a legislative process, down at the Gold Dome, as we like to call it, right? So once I really understood that, I was able to take some of my power back because I had power and understanding. So a lot of us think voting, doesn't matter. And it might not be anybody in this room, but it might be someone that you know. But why does voting matter? Because it actually shapes our communities. It shapes what communities we can live in. It shapes the socioeconomic conditions that impact us, right? It shapes the houses we can live in. It shapes even where we can work. If we all think about it, there were so many fights to get $15 to be our minimum wage here in Georgia. We see national fights all the time. Guess what? Folks have to put people in place in power, and we have to vote for said people in order for you to make a fair, livable wage. It matters. It really does. That voting impacts school system, school districts, right? Based on where you live. That's the quality of education that your child will have. And that matters. The healthcare, we think about some of the topics when people have their political platforms, is healthcare, it's Medicaid, it's how we're able to take care of our elderly loved ones, right? And it's also about safety, because if there is a divestment from a community, um, that unfortunately means that poverty, a lot of other details may lead to some safety issues, right? So we have to think about even the trash can that's outside your house, that is weighed upon by voting. Local elections, right? Everyone is thinking, oh, federal election, yes, that's important. And what's more important are the people that we actually get to see every day. I know me, I can see my city council person whenever I go to City Hall. I can go, I can knock on their door pretty much, and I can impact, and I can say, hey, I'm in this neighborhood. I need some help. I voted for you. Therefore, you should be doing what I need you to do, right? Zoning, where your house is located, school boards, taxes. We vote on all of this stuff, right? And it doesn't matter until it matters. Can I have the next slide? So I want to talk about just a couple pieces of legislation that I know that has been impacted by everyday people, right? Like voting rights. We are currently going to be down at the Capitol fighting for justice impacted people to get our right to vote. We put those people in office, so they should answer to us for those of us that can vote. A lot of issues like let's talk about Senate Bill 63, where underneath the Gold Dome, folks were saying that you can't bail your loved ones out of jail unless you are a bail bondsman. Everyday people, like people at bar business, we fought. We said, no, 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 that's not how it's going to happen. And in partnership with a lot of folks that are here, we were able to stay that. So just because they say it under the Gold Dome doesn't mean it always has to go through, because we have power as everyday regular people. We may not have money, but we sure got a lot of people power, and it can impact so many things, y'all. I just really want you to think about it. Financial instability, right? Like restricted community support. You seen there was fires and hurricanes everywhere. Who we vote for matter, because at the end of the day, we have to get support and it has to be approved underneath a legislative system. And when we think about, again, I'm going to keep going back to minimum wage, right? Because that is your monies that are in your pocket that matters. Who we pick, who we don't pick, who we sit at home and say, oh, that doesn't matter. Oh, yes, it does. If you make $8 versus $15, it very much well matters. So I just want to encourage everyday folks. Can I have the next slide, please? I want to encourage everyday folks like you, me, for us to really be involved, to learn who is representing you. Who did you vote or not vote for to represent you? And it's not too late to change. We have a whole nother legislative cycle. If you are in the city of Atlanta this year, we have everybody on the chopping block. So we have the opportunity for our voices to be heard. And remember, these people work for you, whether you voted for them or not. If they are in your district, you are in their district. They work for you. So I want to encourage everyone to take a picture of this QR code and find out like who works for you. You have somebody on employ, figure who that is, and then you make your voices known to them. You call them. You go down to the Capitol, you see them, you let them know what is not going good in your community, what you need to change, who you need to be included in a system that's excluded. And that is how everyday people like you and me can actually make a difference in this world. And I will pass it over to you. Anne?
Yes. Thank you, Bree. It's always tough to follow Bree in a presentation. But you laid a great groundwork for why policy change matters. But we know a lot of people are new to this work of policy change. So we want to give a little more context or examples about what is policy change versus some of the other things that we all do as well. So this picture and the story I'm about to tell kind of illustrates sort of the difference between meeting people's immediate needs, doing individual advocacy, or systemic policy change. So we need all three of those, right? But as this picture demonstrates, like this is, you may have heard the story about there's a village and people are seeing babies floating down the river. And they are, rescuing the babies, of course, like getting the babies out of the water and making sure that they're dry and warm and clothed and they have food that they need. If they need a doctor, take them to the doctor. They're keep pulling babies out of the water, out of the water, out of the water. And that's great, right? We need to do that. But then eventually, they've done this for year after year after year, and everyone's exhausted. And they say, well, why are there so many babies floating on the river? Let's go upstream and figure out what is causing these babies to float on the river. Are they being pushed in? Are they falling in? What's going on? So they go to find the root cause, and they hopefully can stop the flow of people floating on the river. And there might still be some people floating down the river, but it'll be a lot less if they can change the problem at the source. So one example of this Go back to the other one for a minute. So one example of this is if you have a child, let's say I'm a parent, well, many of your parents, right? You have a child who is having trouble learning to read. They're in the early grades, are having trouble learning to read. So you can do all that you can at home, like to meet their immediate needs. Like you read to them, you help them with your homework, you do all those things. Then you also might want to do individual advocacy, right? You're going to call the teacher, the school, the social worker, and say, my child is struggling. What can you do to help? Can you set them up with an after school tutor, special reading intervention, something like that, right? If you want to take to the next step, you can find the other parents, like maybe at the bus stop, right? Are there other parents whose kids are struggling with reading? And you go together with them to the school board and you say, there's a lot of kids here who are having trouble reading. We need to, advocate for more paraprofessionals or reading specialists at the school. We need to allocate more funding for that. So that's kind of going upstream, not just for your own individual child, but for everybody in the system. So in the next slide, again, that's kind of when we're talking about systemic policy change, there's actually kind of two ways, at least at Georgia Justice Project. And I forgot to introduce myself. Sorry, my name is Ann Colleton. I'm the Policy and Outreach Coordinator at the Georgia Justice Project. And at GJP, we talk about two different kinds of policy change. One is big P policy change, which is when you're changing a law or a statute, right? You can change that. And that is required when an elected body, like the Georgia legislature or Congress or city council, will pass a law to change something. There's also a small p policy change where you don't require passing a law, but a government entity can just change their own administrative practices to change something. And I'll give an example of this. A later speaker, shout out to Dominique, will be coming on later from Women on the Rise. So they have a campaign to change the parole process in Georgia. They're going to be working on something big P policy, like changing the lifer statute, right? So it used to be that people would be considered for parole after 7 years. And then the Georgia legislature passed a law. Now it's 14. Then it was 14 years before you could even be considered for parole. And then in 2016, now you have to serve at least 30 years before you even be considered for parole. So they're going to be looking at changing that policy, that law. But at the same time, they're advocating with the parole board to be more transparent, to consider, like, how do you make decisions? Will you make that more? How are you basing your decisions? Will you allow hearings where somebody can go and testify on behalf of somebody who's seeking parole? So that's small P policy change. So most of what we're going to be talking about tonight is the big P policy, but just to give a picture of different kinds of systemic change that we can advocate for. Last thing I want to say before we move on is that if you are working for a nonprofit organization who has never done policy change before, or maybe you're a member of a faith community, and someone on your board says, but we're a nonprofit, we can't do policy change, we can't lobby, please know that you can. That 501c3 nonprofits can advocate for bills and policies. The only thing that we cannot do is advocate for a particular elected official or political party. So as long as you don't do that, if you're just talking about issues and bills, that is completely legitimate and something that we should be doing. So we're going to play a video. But if you advance the slide and just hit it once, it should stay there. So we're going to show a video. So don't hit play yet. So this video is going to be it's from Schoolhouse Rock. So you'll remember it from your childhood. So this is about big P policy change, about how a bill becomes a law. So in this video, they're going to talk about the U.S. Congress, Washington, D.C., and the president. So just remember that every time they mention that, the same exact process will happen in Georgia, the Georgia State Capitol in Atlanta, the Georgia legislature instead of Congress, and the governor. So the same process exists just in Washington and in the state legislature. So the one thing about this video I will say that I wish was different was that when they're talking about the committee hearings and they're just outside the room and all the stuff is happening in the committee rooms, that's one of those things that we'll talk about later. That's where a lot of this advocacy can happen in the committee room. So we'll talk more about that as well. But now we're ready to play the video. Thank you.
Woo, you sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington. Well, I wonder who that sad little scrap of paper is.
I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I'm sitting here on Capitol Hill. Well, it's a long, long journey to the capital city. It's a long, long wait while I'm sitting in committee, but I know I'll be a law someday. At least I hope and pray that I will, but today I am still just a bill.
Gee, Bill, you certainly have a lot of patience and courage.
Well, I got this far. When I started, I wasn't even a bill. I was just an idea. Some folks back home decided they wanted a law passed, so they called their local congressman, and he said, "You're right, there ought to be a law." Then he sat down and wrote me out and introduced me to Congress, and I became a bill. And I'll remain a bill until they decide to make me a law. I'm just a bill, yes, I'm only a bill, and I got as far as Capitol Hill. Well, now I'm stuck in committee, and I'll sit here and wait while a few key congressmen discuss and debate whether they should let me be a law. I hope and pray that they will, but today I am still just a bill.
Listen to those congressmen arguing. Is all that discussion and debate about you?
Yeah, I'm one of the lucky ones. Most bills never even get this far. I hope they decide to report on me favorably, otherwise I may die.
Die?
Yeah, die in committee. Oh, but it looks like I'm gonna live. Now I go to the House of Representatives and they vote on me.
If they vote yes, what happens?
Then I go to the Senate and the whole thing starts all over again.
Oh, no.
Oh, yes. I'm just a bill. Yes, I'm only a bill. And if they vote for me on Capitol Hill, well, then I'm off to the White House where I'll wait in a line with a lot of other bills for the president to sign. And if he signs me, then I'll be a law. How I hope and pray that he will. But today I am still just a bill.
You mean even if the whole Congress says you should be a law, the president can still say no?
Yes, that's called a veto. If the president vetoes me, I have to go back to Congress and they vote on me again, and by that time you're so
By
old,
that time, it's very unlikely that you become a law. It's not easy to become a law, is it?
No, but how I hope and pray that I will. But today I am still just a bill.
He signed your bill. Now you're a law.
Oh, yes.
Hello. Well, I hope everyone enjoyed that. I found myself singing to it once again, all these years later from when I first saw it. I am Kathy Harmon Christian, and I'm the executive director of Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. And if we can move to the next slide, please.
Whew.
The one just
Whew.
after this.
You sure gotta climb a lot of steps to get to this Capitol building here in Washington.
Thank you so much. Okay, so in visual format, what you've just seen, and I wanted to have a little fun with this. Okay, so I discovered, so I'm going to suggest an idea for a bill. And my idea is that Georgia needs a state legume. Alabama has a state legume, and it's a peanut, but we do not. We have a state vegetable, the Vidalia sweet onion. We have a state fruit, the state peach, and we have a state prepared food, which is grits. But we do not have a state legume because a peanut, unfortunately, is not a nut, it's a legume. But let's say I want to have a bill for this, and I'd like to have this become a law. So I'm going to call up my representative or my senator and say, hey, I have this idea. Would you help me draft this bill and then give it to the legislative council to turn it into legal language? And let's just say that my representative says, yes, I'm happy to do this. So it gets introduced to the Georgia General Assembly, and then the first reader will read it out. They'll read the title of this new bill and its number. and it'll be assigned to a committee. And it'll go to the committee, and then people will debate it within this committee. And you can come and testify as why you want a peanut to be the state legume and that you want a state legume. And maybe somebody will say a lentil, and they'll have an argument about it. But there'll be this happening on the committee, in committee. And then it might get a second reader, and then finally, if it passes through committee and they say, yes, this is a great idea, we recommend that we have a Georgia state legume. So it might then be introduced to the floor, since I have a representative, to the floor of the House, and then they'll vote on it. And let's just say they say, yes, this is such a fabulous idea. And then it crosses over into the Senate, where the process will start again. There'll be a first reader announcing what this bill is about, and it'll be assigned to a committee, and then there'll be various discussions in that committee, and then it will possibly go to the floor in the Senate for a vote. And let's just say, and so this is the most possible good possibility for this. And then it will go for a vote, and they won't want any changes to it, and the governor will approve it. Yay! Well, that's the best case scenario. Most of the time, this does not happen. 90% of the bills that will happen, that will get introduced, will not make it to the governor's desk. But we can't be discouraged by this. So next slide. Here's what happens at the General Assembly. It's a 2-year session. So this year, we're just starting with our first of 2 years of the General Assembly for 2025 and 2026. And the wonderful thing about that is, let's say my bill for a Georgia legume comes into the legislative cycle this year, but nothing really happens. It's still alive for next year. So it has next year as a chance to pass and go all the way through the legislature. Our General Assembly in Georgia starts the second Monday of January every year. So yesterday, January 13th, was the first day of the Georgia General Assembly. And there are 40 legislative days. And what that means is they're not consecutive. So the calendar will be set, and you'll be able to see the 40 legislative days. But sometimes they're skipping a day, or something happens and they're not able to have it, let's say, Thursday, February 1st or something. So you need to look at the calendar, because it's not always synced up directly with the days of the month. And there are 2 very important days in the legislative calendar, which are Crossover Day, which this year is scheduled for March 6th, and Sine Die, which this year is scheduled for April 4th. Crossover Day means that if a bill that's been introduced in the House, let's say, has not been able to cross over to the Senate for approval, then it's not going to go anywhere this year. And Sine Die is the last day where everything has to be introduced and pass by midnight on April the 4th this year for it to pass to the governor. There'll also be an adjournment resolution time, which happens at the end of Sine Die. Next slide. So the structure of the Georgia General Assembly, it is similar to Congress at the U.S. federal level. There are 2 chambers, and folks are elected every 2 years, and they are part-time. This is not a full-time position, even though sometimes I'm sure it feels like that to the legislators. In our Senate, there are 56 members who are elected, and the lieutenant governor presides over the Senate. So if you go on to the Georgia General Assembly, you can watch live feed from the Senate, and you'll see Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who is presiding over the Senate. And equally, if you watch video, live stream video of the State House of Representatives, you will see the Speaker of the House, John Burns, presiding over the House, which has 180 members. And here's a fun fact that in the House, there are currently 103 Republicans and 98 Democrats. So a bill would need 91 votes to pass, or to pass or to stop a bill, depending on whether it's deemed good or bad. And in the Senate, there are 32 Republicans and 23 Democrats, and therefore there is a need of 29 votes for a bill to pass. Next slide. So the most significant thing of our Georgia General Assembly is that they have to pass a balanced budget for the state. It is actually the only constitutional mandate for the General Assembly. That's what they have to do, is they have to pass a balanced budget. And you'll see that this first week and beyond is what they'll be focused most on, is passing that balanced budget. They do have broad power to enact laws covering almost any matter. Perhaps my bill to have the state legume is a peanut. But there are limitations to the power of the General Assembly. And that would fall under the categories of the U.S. Constitution as interpreted by the courts, federal laws, the Georgia Constitution as interpreted by the courts, and the governor's veto power. Next slide. And just to give an example of last year's budget report, you can see where the majority of categories where money has been apportioned. The highest category is pre-K through 12th grade education. 38% of the budget is allocated towards that. And the next largest amount is to healthcare. 21% is allocated to that. For many of us, the criminal legal system is a very important piece of the pie. And you'll see that in this particular report, that garners 6% of the budget. However, there has been news recently that the governor wants to I think, apportion another 600 million. I'd have to double check that to make sure, for reform within the mass incarceration system. Next slide. So here are some committees to watch. In the House, Judiciary Non-Civil, and I'm particularly focused on that because we have a bill for people with intellectual disabilities and the death penalty, and more than likely it will be assigned to this committee, Judiciary Non-Civil. And Juvenile Justice is also a key committee to watch what's happening in there. Motor Vehicles, Public Safety and Homeland Security. And in the Senate, key committees to watch: Children and Families, the Judiciary, and Public Safety. And next slide. All right, and I'd like to pass it off to Shaniqua, who is going to pick it up from here.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Shaniqua Levin. I'm the CEO and founder of the Women's Diversity Network, and we're learning a lot about how government works. So how do you play a role in that? You know, outside of voting in the elections, now that we have this bill and say, you know, let's keep with this legumes bill. So now we have this bill. What is your role? How can you impact its approval along the way? So there's several things you can do. One, we can call them like action alerts. You can make phone calls. You call your lawmakers, look at the ones that haven't supported it and reach out to them. That's one step. And if you don't know who has supported something or who hasn't, usually organizations that are supporting those bills will tell you and send out action alerts to you about who to call and what to say and give you a script and everything. So you want to follow some of the organizations that do work around the issues that are important to you, because often they will organize a lot of these actions and opportunities for advocacy that I'm going to talk to you about tonight. So that's one way. Another way, of course, is doing a Google search, simple search for like bills in Georgia and their standing, and there'll be some sites that come in to lead you. And if you go to Georgia's website as well, you can tell the status and who are sponsors and where it's at. But sometimes that's a whole lot. I know I ain't doing all that most of the time. So I usually will wait for my organizations that I support to send me their action alerts or to invite me to a call. So a phone call is really simple. A lot of times there will be a script, and if it's not, you just call in and talk about what you believe in and why you support having legumes. And you know what, if it's important to you, or what you if you don't support it, share that as well, and reasons why, and why it means something to you, because these lawmakers need to hear from people in their districts. They need to know that you're voting for them, and that you matter, you care about these things, and that this is something you want them to elevate, and basically their vote from you depends on this. So that's one thing. Say phone calls is not your thing. Pull up the email. Same thing. Write an email, explain why this means something to you. Or if you don't feel like explaining that, a lot of times groups will send out stuff that gives you a whole email template. And you just copy and paste and add your name. And the more and more people that send these messages, the more and more we flood them with how we feel about these issues, the more they're going to have to pay attention to these issues. Another thing is petitions, getting other people to sign on to, whether it's a support or whether it's asking for something to not be passed. Walk around, either if it's your neighborhood, if it's a local club that you belong to, think about what's outside of your field or outside of your house. And maybe it's even just your household. Shoot, some of our families, that's a lot of work right there. Just our family, period. Create a petition, get other people to sign on to it, and mail that in or email that in or share it with the organizations. Another thing is advocacy days, which we will be doing at our event that's coming up as well. And this is a chance to speak to lawmakers face to face at the Capitol. So, or the Gold Dome, as they call it. So, one of the things to do is, you don't always have to know all the words to say. A lot of times, the organizations and will train you on some different talking points, because realistically, we need people in the room that know the issue, know all of its impacts and effects. And a lot of times, if you go in an organization, they do know all of that. So, they need you to share your lived experience, why you support it or don't. And they also need you just in the room. They need people in the room that are from the district that lawmaker is a part of, represents. So that way you can, they know that people in their district care about these issues, and they're seeing you and they're hearing your stories. And then as they go and advocate for this bill, they will call on the stories that you shared with them. So there's a role for everybody. We need you to show up. You can also make your own meetings. You don't have to go with an organization. You can make your own meetings with these lawmakers. They answer to you. They work for you. They are supposed to meet with you, whether it's at the Gold Dome or in district, where in the townships and towns that they're representing. So you can go to panels and workshops so you can learn more information about how you can make a difference. We're always putting on different things like this Talk Justice Tuesday, our advocacy days coming up. We're always putting on things, as well as other organizations. So look to see if you have an issue that you care about, look to see what organizations are out there and what events they're putting on. Follow them on social media, get on their newsletter list. Don't ignore it, read it. So that way you can stay up to date, reshare the information. All of this stuff is really important. Every last thing. Never think that one of the things that you're doing is so little and doesn't count, because we need to all putting on pressure in different ways, and we never know what's going to be that catalyst, that thing that reaches the lawmaker to influence their decision. Of course, sharing your stories and testifying. So whether you're doing it through, you're recording your story or someone's got a camera, we need the stories because sometimes you can't be there in person. And we need to be able to share the stories to educate others about what's going on and to help influence our lawmakers to represent to pass and support the issues that we care about. And a lot of times when these issues, when we've got to the phase of where they're at, the bill status and they're going into committee, they'll have public hearings for you to come out and speak about what this means to you. So that way it can go on to the next step. They always have to do that and put it out to the public. So that way they've heard from the public about where they stand. So again, that's the same thing. You can go and speak at those hearings, or you can come be a body in that office. And sometimes when we're clapping and cheering for somebody saying something, they need to feel all of that. So of course, just contact your lawmakers. Find out, identify ways that you want to engage with advocacy, things that you're comfortable with doing, and do it. Engage with them on social media. They all got social media pages. Be the one commenting. Hey, let them know. How are you supporting this? What are you doing with that? Are you voting for that? Be that one. They're paying attention to all of these things. Next slide, please. So some do's and don'ts when talking to lawmakers, right? We gotta be strategic about things sometimes, So next slide. So you don't want to try to cover too much. They're gonna forget stuff. You want to just cover, like, think yourselves in bullet points, because you can always follow back up with them with, like, can I leave you with this material? Or can I send you an email? Or if you don't know something, it's easy enough to be like, I'm not sure about that. I'm going to go and get some more information and get back to you. And to be honest, that happens so much. You would think because they're in this work and they're doing all of this, that they would be the experts in the field, but a lot of time it's you all that are the experts. So there'll be many times where you got to go back and give them more information. So you don't want to try to cover too much. You want to be short, because these meetings, especially if you're meeting in person, only are a few minutes long. Sometimes they give you 5-10 minutes at most. So you want to avoid lawmakers that you think might be opposed to your ideas. So that can be controversial. Sometimes people like go talk to them too, right? I try to spend a lot of my time either with those that I know are supportive, so I can thank them for their support, and so I can let them know, how, like, ask them what else that we can do while they're in this phase. And then I also try to work with those in the middle, or those that I can sway, those that probably would be supportive or need more interest or need more help or it's not on their radar. Now, that doesn't say that you should leave the others alone, but sometimes it's not always worth it to spend tons of time with the others. You want to build your base and activate your base. So that goes with lawmakers too. Let the lawmakers sometimes go fight with the opposition and make those behind the door deals. You don't want to make threats, of course, or make promises that you can't keep. We want to have some type of decorum when we go. What's that word? We want to be demure, classy, and real, though. Don't lose yourself. Keep it real. You don't want to offend. If the lawmaker doesn't respond to you, don't feel offended. Like, they're bombarded. Everybody's coming for them, asking for something. Just be persistent, though. Don't let it go. Find allies, find other people, use the other tactics. Don't stop. Don't let go, but also have a little thicker skin when we're doing this, because there's no need to feel like unfit, or find another ally. Go to another lawmaker. Next slide. Okay. So you want to be prepared. Come with some talking points, y'all. Even if you got to put it on your phone real quick, Google something, chat GBT something, come with something. So you want to share your personal experience. Your lived experience is so important. People can have all the education in the world, but sometimes they're missing that lived experience. And that's where you come in. Your story is important. Your story is why you're fighting. Whether it's your story, you're talking about someone else in your family story, you're advocating for other people, things that are important, your personal experience, and even just why this matters and connecting them to that is so priceless. So of course you want to be polite and open to questions, and you don't want to feel standoffish. You want to have a relationship with these lawmakers. So that way they're giving you information, they're taking your calls and meetings, and they're voting your way. You always want to ask their permission at their position. You want to kind of get them to answer you. And like, are they going to support it or no? Get them to commit something, and that's considered a public meeting too. So you can share their experience, what they've said in a public forum, that they're gonna hold them, they're gonna vote yes, they're gonna vote no. You can hold them accountable in that way to them. You could say, like, you said yes on January 14th at 6:47 p.m. You can say these things, and these things mean something. So if they say I can't make the decision at that time, you ask them when's a good time to follow up, when's a good time to call back, and they'll usually tell you. You want to get something concrete, and always thank them for their time. They're lawmakers, they're fighting for us as well. They see a lot of people, they took your meeting, your call, they responded to them. It doesn't hurt to say thank you. And a lot of times they probably don't receive that many compliments for the work we do, even when they're voting in our favor. They see more complaints. So it doesn't hurt to thank them for also supporting the work, and always follow up with any resources you offered. And, again, get them to be accountable to something and make deadlines to things. So I hope that you use these advocacy tips, and I'm always here to encourage you. The JRP is always here, and all of us, to help you answer any questions, connect to any organization doing the work, and, any way that we can be of assistance. And I am going to turn the next portion over to Dominique.
Thank you, Shaniqua. Hey, everybody. My name is Dominique Grant. I'm the Campaign and Operations Manager with Women on the Rise, Georgia. So happy to be with y'all tonight. So excited to see the turnout. So I'm here to just piggyback on everything that we've been discussing this evening. Shaniqua provided us with some amazing points in regards to what it looks like when we are at the Capitol. So here's an example of what it will look like when you're going to advocate. Hopefully, those of you on the call plan to join us for Justice Day in February, and you'll get a opportunity to take the famous stair picture. That's what I like to call it. Everyone has one. But this is what the Capitol will look like, and this is typically what it looks like when you're inside. The Capitol is a really big building, but the main floors that the action happens is typically on the third floor, which where the General Assembly entrances and a lot of the Senate committee offices. And you can go to the next slide, please. We were supposed to have one more picture, back one more. There you go. Thank you. All right. So, and this is just a visual of what it may look like. So the picture on the bottom is the House of Representatives chamber. You can actually view this room from the top floor and get an opportunity to see. It is extremely hectic in there, as you can see, and what you're seeing is what it would typically look like. And the picture on the top is a committee room. There are multiple committee rooms throughout the building. And I've found myself in quite a few. These rooms are typically more intimate, smaller, and you have an opportunity to face your legislators in a more intimate environment when you're in the committee room. House of Representatives chamber can get overcrowded, and it's not typical that you may not be able to get in, or something is too loud, or it's too late. That's just the way the game goes, the limited space, the limited opportunity. But we just wanted to provide a visual of what it will look like at the Capitol. Thank you. Next slide. Thank you. All right, and then next slide again, so I can have the picture with it, Ross. Thank you. All right, so The next thing I wanted to cover, similar to what Shaniqua mentioned, is myths and methods when you're speaking to these lawmakers face to face. Over the past few years with working with Women on the Rise, I have had the pleasure, not always the pleasure, but the opportunity to come in contact with many lawmakers. And I am not going to lie and say that every interaction is going to be peachy. You are going to be coming across people who have completely different values and ideas than what you may believe. And that is okay. Our goal is to collaborate and figure out how can we get the things passed to help our people. What do we need to do to help our people? So some of the myths you may hear about lobbying or attending lobby days or advocating directly in the faces of your legislature is that it's a waste of time. I'm here to tell you, and there were times, I would definitely say in my younger years that I felt this way, but there is a particular lawmaker at the Capitol that I have had numerous interactions with, who has passed legislation that a lot of organizations on this call may deem harmful, like SB 63 or changing the parole laws from 14 years to 30 years. I won't say any names. But I have noticed that the more I'm coming to speak and the more our organizations show up and show out and share our stories, they are listening. So to that point, another myth, they've already made up their minds. That isn't always the case. I won't say all the time, but a lot of times people just need to understand how this can impact them on a different level, or you have to find avenues to figure out what impacts them the most. Financial, budgetary things. It may not be the human nature aspect, but there are ways that you can change people's minds. They won't listen to me. That is a myth. You can make them listen to you. Okay? You can make them listen to you. I would like when we come into these spaces, not to be cocky and to be humble, but to also understand that we are the community. Our taxes pay these people to listen to our issues. We are the ones that are on the ground doing the work to get their votes or not. So I think it is extremely important to always recognize that even if they don't want to listen to you, they will at some point have to listen to you. So the whole idea of they won't listen is a lie. I won't mention other methods into making sure they listen, but they will listen. In regards to methods that are effective and that can be used, face-to-face conversations are super important. The more they see you, the more comfortable they are, the more they're willing to listen. I've had to show my face on multiple occasions to get certain legislators to say, oh, she's serious. Testifying at committee hearings. So in this picture that is on the slide, you'll see my executive director, Robin Hassan Simpson, our reentry coordinator, Melody, and myself talking to someone from the GDC. More than likely, if they look at our organization and look at the work that they do, sending a quick email may not have gotten that person's attention. But being able to testify face-to-face and having those conversations was able to get us somewhere. A personal letter or email. Again, I see a lot of people in the chat talking about sharing their experiences. Women on the Rise is really big about us creating our own narratives and allowing us to share our stories. It does work. Phone calls to legislators' offices. Again, sometimes that can be effective, but these are all things that work. If you have a legislator who is getting calls back to back to back to back to back, saying they need to support this bill, their staffer has to bring that up to them. So it's not something that can be ignored. And then lastly, like Shaniqua mentioned before, rallies and petitions. So these are all methods and ways that we can get senators and legislators to look into our issues and find out more. And next slide, please. Okay, so the last thing that I'll be talking to you about tonight before I pass it over, as most of you know, Women on the Rise is an organization comprised of justice impacted and formerly incarcerated people. We are really big on person first language because how people address us or how we address each other is how we allow people to speak about us or to us and to dehumanize us. So here are just some examples of how you can incorporate language to force your legislators to look at the people that you're talking about as humans. One inmate, a lot of this I know a lot of us know, so I'm gonna just run through them real quick, and the slides are going out. But inmate is out of pocket, felon, criminal. We do not use that. This is an incarcerated person, a person with a felony conviction. Ex-cons, absolutely not. It is formerly incarcerated or justice impacted. I check people on that all the time. Handicapped. Our people in our lives that are living with a disability are not handicapped. They can do things for themselves. They just have different abilities. Drug abuse. This is going to be controversial, but certain drugs, you may not always be abusing them. This person may have a substance use disorder. Crackhead or junkie. Again, we do not want to talk about the people that we love in that way. So this is a person with a substance use disorder. And then lastly, crazy, psycho, this person is crazy. As a person that has multiple mental health diagnoses, I personally, think it is important, one, to understand that a person is not their diagnosis. So a person is not their circumstance. And that is a person with a mental health condition. And then this bottom box right here, please understand, follow people's appropriate pronouns. And if you have a hard time doing that, please call people by their name. It is essential to make people comfortable and for them to actually want to listen to you. Our world is different. If you are confused about someone's pronouns, it is okay to ask them what they prefer, or again, call them by their name. So that is what I wanted to cover for you all tonight. I just wanted to make sure that when we are doing all these wonderful things that we're talking about on this call this evening, that we are using the appropriate language. So we are explaining to them how they are to address us and how they are to address our issues and how to humanize us. So thank you so much. I'm going to go ahead and pass it over to Wesley, who will also be getting us started with some role play. Thank you. And you can go to the next slide, Roz. My bad.
Thanks, Dominique. And good evening, all. My name is Wesley Myrick. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Interfaith Public Policy Center. And so we're going to talk to you over the next few slides just about two pieces of legislation that are coming up on the docket this session. So first and foremost is the Intellectual Disabilities Bill. It is one that my colleague mentioned earlier, but it specifically focuses on two things: changing the burden of proof for persons with intellectual disabilities in the state of Georgia so that they are not susceptible to the death penalty. And then two, changing the pretrial determination process so that people actually can be denoted as having an intellectual disability and therefore not susceptible or subject to the death penalty in the state of Georgia. We are an outlier in that space nationally, based on the 2002 Supreme Court ruling in Atkins v. Virginia, which said that putting people with intellectual disabilities to death was indeed unconstitutional. So you'll hear us talk a little bit more about how you would engage the lawmaker on this particular issue, and we'll walk through that. So just to introduce the presentation that you'll see in just one moment. Next slide, please. All right, and the second role play that you'll hear us talk through is actually one that is focused on reducing barriers to occupational licensing for those persons with arrest or conviction records. So as my colleague was just mentioning, the persons that are just as impacted, here's an opportunity for individuals to lower barriers to really good work in careers and occupations that are in need of people who can do that work and do it well. And so there's no reason to limit any population from engaging in that work. So what you'll see in just a moment, you'll see three iterations of engagement. You'll see one where A lawmaker is receptive to the engagement and they ask questions and they really want to learn more. You'll see one where a lawmaker is not exactly dismissive, but could be certainly viewed as such. And third, where the lawmaker is on the fence. They don't really know. They're busy. They're thinking about 16 other things. As you saw, these days in the Capitol can be both contentious and long and full of engagement. And so while they were polite, they were certainly very interested in engaging, right? And so you'll see that in just a moment, and we will talk you through on the other side. Next slide, please. And we can press play. Press play. We'll talk about it on the other side.
Setup. This skit depicts a legislator being introduced to an issue by a concerned citizen. There will be two examples. One where the legislator is generally dismissive. The second would depict a legislator who is open to learning more general knowledge. Skit 1, dismissive.
Good morning, sir. I'm Senator Smith. How can I help you today?
Hey there. Good morning, Senator Smith. Thanks for your time and taking time to speak with me today. Wanted to check in with you about SB 235, which impacts persons with intellectual disabilities and use of the death penalty.
Oh, great. Please tell me more.
Well, the bill is pretty important. It lowers the possibility that a person with intellectual disabilities be put to death in our state by reducing legal threshold for application of death penalty. I'm coming home myself, and I know situations, things happen, people make decisions, but in the public health age, mental things are going on, so we hoping you get some support for us.
Well, thank you for reaching out. I will certainly have this member
Uh,
of my staff look into it. You have a
hello,
great day.
hello, hello. All right, and skit two. Morning, I'm Senator Smith. How can I help you today?
Good morning, Senator Smith. Thank you for taking the time to speak to me today. I'm here to talk about SB 235, which impacts persons with disabilities and the use of the death penalty.
Uh, 36235. Look, thanks for being here. I am familiar with that bill, but I'm unsure whether we'll be able to support this at this time. I understand the bill focuses to safeguard persons with intellectual disabilities. Is that correct?
That is correct, Senator. Right now in Georgia, persons with disabilities are still able to be executed under the law, even though other states in the nation have an option to more leniently apply the death penalty. Georgia has an opportunity to lead on this issue. Like so many other states, we have an opportunity to change the law to lower the threshold from beyond a reasonable doubt to a preponderance of evidence. This matters because it gives the judge more latitude in sentencing, and it will impact thousands of Georgians each year.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Well, what we say is preponderance. Does that mean the changes you propose will give more latitude to the state and provide better protection for the persons with intellectual disabilities?
Yes, sir. That's exactly right. I also have to note that this is really important because it helps support families and citizens, who need their legislators to help them make this path easier.
Well, hey, hold that call, please. Thank you so much for your advocacy. Let me connect you to my staff and perhaps you can follow up. Thanks.
Thank you, Senator.
Mm,
Here's a document that'll explain everything in more detail. You can review it at your
Yeah,
leisure.
yeah. Thank you and have a good day.
You as well. Thank you.
Good morning, Senator Merrick. I'm so excited that you had the availability to take our meeting today.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to meet you.
My name is Shaniqua Levin. I'm the CEO and founder of the Women's Diversity Network, and I'm also part of the Southern Center for Human Rights Justice Reform Project. And today I have brought with me Amari Fox, who lives in the area that you represent.
Good to meet you both. Good to meet you both.
Well, I want to talk to you today about a bill that got lots of support last session, and we're excited and hopeful that it will be reintroduced. Are you familiar with it? It's called Getting Georgians Back to Work.
Yeah, I believe I am.
I'll tell you, I'll just refresh your memory a little bit. It's about opening access to occupational licenses. So Georgia, should reduce barriers that prevent qualified individuals from working in licensed fields. Many Georgians with an old or irrelevant criminal record are denied the opportunity to pursue a career. Reform will help Georgia meet workforce needs and allow rehabilitated individuals to move on from their past. And as we've learned, 1 in 7 jobs require an occupational license, including 1 in 4 of Georgia's high demand jobs.
Hmm. Okay. Yeah, I remember that now. That sounds really important for a pretty potentially large population.
Yeah, and I believe you were supportive of last semester. Last session, sorry. It didn't pass though, although it had lots of support for the bill. There was some, it passed both changers, but then kind of ran out of time on all of our representatives agreeing to amendments in the final days and hours of session. So it really had wide support among our legislators, including the lieutenant governor. So even the board, the state of this, the Secretary of State's office that oversees licensing also have entered or either been neutral or supportive of the effort. So we have lots of organizations and licensing departments that supportive of this. So it really seems like a win for Georgians for this bill to actually go through and be called back this year. So I wanted to know, do you have any plans to make sure that you are supportive of this bill being called back to the floor this session?
You know what? Based on what you told me, it's probably best that we go to conference committee, and let's figure out where which conference committee is actually at the particular bill. Let's talk to their chairman and see if we can't get this resolved.
Awesome. That I think that's what we need is people to be proactive. And Omari, if you can explain a little bit from your personal experience of why this bill would mean so much to someone like you who actually resides in the senator's district.
Well, for me, I'm just coming home like a lot of folks, and we just want to get on our feet. And any support, we're always talking about participating in democracy, and what better way than to reach out to our senator and really support the people directly. So I'm just one voice of many, trying to get this thing through and look out for our people. And I feel like the senator sounds like he means well, so let's make it do what it do.
Thank you. Thank you for being here too, Amari. It's hard sometimes for people from the district to take time out of work to come and speak about these issues. So as you can see, for him to take this time out of his day, this is something that's extremely important to not only him, but to Georgians. We need to stimulate the economy. People need to be able to make a working wage for themselves. And they've also paid their time for their mistakes in the past and don't need to be penalized even further. So I know that this got held up before and it's going to have to go through the whole process. But I'm hoping that this time you all can start off on working out the things that held up the bill before. Can we really count on you to go full force with making sure that this bill becomes a reality?
You can count on me. I will, as I said, I'll check back with my colleagues and see where we can move forward. But thank you both. I really do appreciate you both being here, as you said, taking time off from work to come have a conversation with me.
Thank you. So you did say that you were going to go follow up with your colleagues. I would like to see, after you do that, what is it that us advocates can do on the outside to help this bill move along? So is there a day or time next week that works best for me to follow up either with yourself or one of your staff members? So that way we can, see how we can also be supportive of this bill moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. Check in with me next Monday. We want to make sure that as we're setting our paces for each week, that this stays at the top of our list. So just keep reaching out. Keep reaching out to your respective House members and senators. That way we can make sure that when this is on their radar, so that once they hear it coming up on for them for debate, it's not the first time they're hearing about it, and then we can go from there.
Great. And if you have any talking points for us too that is working when you speak with your colleagues, please let us know that. So as we continue to have these meetings, we could utilize those things to help sway them and get this deal done.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, anything that will help increase the tax base for the state is always helpful. So that's a great talking point. And you also want to talk about, as you said earlier, this is an economics issue. You know, we want Georgians to be able to work so they can pay taxes, so we can have the resources to support all the other programs that our state sponsors. So thank you both again uh, for everything that you're doing.
All right. I appreciate again you taking the time. I'm going to leave you with a few notes about the bill and how like the constituents and those impacted and supportive of this bill feel. Just to refresh your memory, I know session's starting and you're going to be inundated with lots of information. Always feel free to reach out to us as a resource, and I will definitely be in touch with you next Monday to see how those conversations went.
All right.
Yeah. See you
All
Monday.
right.
Let's make it a moral one, brother. All right.
Yes, sir. Thank you both.
Everyone, have a great day.
You as well. Take care. Alrighty. So yeah, those are 2 or 3 examples of what conversations with legislators might look like. Taking into account that sometimes legislators will have absolutely no idea about the particular issue you're reaching out to them about. And as we said, they are going to be seeing lots of issues over the course of the session. So don't take offense to that. This is your opportunity to educate and to share. Likewise, there are going to be some people who vaguely remember an issue or a measure from the
So,
previous session and will want to, again, support you, but they've got to go back and talk to all the relevant colleagues and counterparts in both houses, in both chambers, so to speak. And so, yeah, so I will turn it back over now to Roz.
Hello, and thank you everyone for being here this evening. My name is Rosalind Calhoun. I'm with Bard Business. I'm the Partnership and Alliance Builder. And I just want to make sure that you are aware of the call to action. All that we have spoke about today, we are actually going to put it in action. We want to invite you to attend our Justice Day. Our Justice Day will be on February 25th. We'll be at the Center Presbyterian Church. It's at 201 Washington Street, Southwest Atlanta, Georgia. Please register. Register. We would love to have you all attend and put everything that we have in action so that we can definitely get these bills changed, get these laws changed, and we can make a difference. We encourage you to reach out to the organizations, Southern Center for Human Rights, Georgians for Alternatives to the Death Penalty, Georgia Justice Project, Women on the Rise, Bard Business, Deep Center, and Georgia Interfaith Public Policy Center. We hope you would reach out and we will definitely connect you with more information, and as well, the slides will be shared with you. And with the slides being shared with you, you will see all the panelists' contact information. So we encourage you, we very, very much encourage you to reach out. We have time for you. We have time for anything that you need assistance with. So we definitely encourage you to reach out. We look forward to hearing from you. We want to open up the floor. We want to get all of your questions. We have talked how we can impact these Georgia laws. We've talked about making some calls to action with your phone calls, with your emails, with your petitions. We also want to remind you to join us on February 11th, March 11th, and April 8th. The information is in the chat. Also, our crossover day, which is on March 6th, and our Signy Day, which is on April 4th. So we encourage you to be a part and attend with us. But we would like to open up the floor with questions and comments. What did you learn? Anything that is still confusing? Please share.
Rosalind, one person asked if you could go back to the previous slide so they could see the contact information. Kathy, would you like to speak to the question about the intellectual disabilities bill? No bill has a bill number yet, I don't believe, but Kathy could tell you how to learn more about that.
Yes, I didn't see the question, Anne. Where was it?
What is the bill number? And is it
Uh,
now a Senate bill?
Oh, gotcha. Thank you. Yes, for our wonderful role plays, they made up a number. We don't have the number yet. So it is drafted for the most part and delivered to Legislative Council. And once that goes through, there will be a number. So I will definitely share that out with everyone. We do have a day at the Capitol planned for advocacy for the Intellectual Disabilities Bill, and that's February 12th. And we'd love you to come to that.
We are taking questions. Unfortunately, I don't see the hands up, but if you will put it in the chat, we'll definitely get your questions answered.
And there's a question up in the chat that Katya asked about Medicaid services. I don't have expertise in that area, but if someone else does, you can look up in the chat earlier.
Someone asked, are we going to be in person for Justice Day? And yes, we will be in person.